Brothers and sisters, Father Nathaniel coming to you with a little post-Epiphany homily. Today's the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. But as we kind of close out the Christmas season, I think it's very important to share a little bit about these two great feast days, especially focusing on the Epiphany, which we celebrated yesterday. I guess the question this feast day offers us is, what am I seeking? What am I after? What am I looking for? What's at the center of that infinite heart that I have? What am I pursuing? For many at Christmas were pursuing that special toy that they were looking for. Many of us were traveling over Christmas, so perhaps we were pursuing and seeking a flight that wasn't canceled, trying to find the right gate, trying to find our way home on time. We all go about life, don't we, searching for something, searching in a deep way for fulfillment, for peace, for happiness. The question is, what is happiness? Where is it to be found? Is there something objective that we should all be seeking, or rather that we're ordered towards, that deep down there's a plenitude, there's a fullness, there's an excellence that we're called to experience that we can't find anywhere else? Well, the Epiphany, I think, sheds a little light on that, and the baptism of the Lord certainly, if it will, also does shine light on that theme. In the Epiphany, we see several figures, of which we are one of those, or we at least share in a dominant way right now in our hearts one of the attitudes that one of these, especially three characters, show us. Of course, the Epiphany is about the Lord's revelation to the Gentiles, especially, shining his light, the star leading us to Jesus, to the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who's with us, who was born for you and me, who loves us so much. So we see the wise men, first of all. The wise men, they come from hundreds of miles away from the east, traveling not in a Porsche or not in a train, but they travel on camels and on foot through dust storms, through hot weather, through cold weather, through the risk of being robbed, of not having enough food, and frankly, not knowing what they're going to find. Can you imagine the amount of risk, the amount of chance that they took in seeking out this king, this newborn Messiah? They were hungry. They were seeking the fullness of love. And they were rewarded for their risk. They found Jesus, and they offered these gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which are really, there's different interpretations of these things, acknowledging Jesus' kingship, acknowledging him as God, adoring him, acknowledging his death and the call to go out and evangelize, to share the salvation that he would bring. But, and behind all this, these gifts are simple, humble hearts who are being offered to the Lord Jesus through these acts of worship and adoration. I think a great example for us is that me today. Am I offering Jesus my weakness and my sinfulness? Am I offering him the love of my heart? Am I offering him all that I am? Like the Magi, am I risking my life for him, to find him, to be with him, to put him at the center of my life, knowing that he won't take away who I am, but rather fulfill me? Is that me today? Is that the predominant, despite my weakness, is that what really is sort of dominating my life right now? Then there's Herod. Now, Herod, the gospel says, was afraid. He trembled at the thought that there was another king on the scene, a usurper of his power. He was threatened, and he was afraid. And this is an image for all of us, perhaps, who feel threatened by Jesus. We, maybe aren't afraid because we're not a king, we're not a monarch, but aren't we sometimes very subtly a monarch of our own heart, where we think we own our lives, we think we own our bodies, we think we own our future, we think we own and determine everything for our lives. Kind of the American way. Just do it, fulfill it. Any dream you have, go for it. And very subtly behind all that, though, we can fall into this vanity and pride that makes us think that we're the Lord and the Lord of Lords of our own lives. And that's not true. That's not true at all. And so when Jesus comes on the scene with the demands of love, with to be the king of our hearts, at the end of the day, the point of reference for what is good and evil, the point of reference for what we're here for, what we're destined for, how we should be living, what we should be seeking in life. Well, that butts up against our own instituted dreams and plans and desires, and frankly, at times, addictions and power plays and attachments. And so it's no wonder that you and I struggle at times like Herod did. And we're afraid and we're fearful that Jesus is somehow going to take away our freedom. Now, brothers and sisters, that's a lie of the devil. It's a lie of our fallen nature. because Jesus came to fulfill us. He came to free us. He's not a domineering God. He's not a usurper God. He came to set us free. Freedom isn't to do whatever you want. Freedom is to be free to do what we should do. It's freedom to be able to become the person of excellence that God created us to be. And so that requires, that presupposes the plan that God has for us. Because at the end of the day, none of us created ourselves. None of us determined we would be human or that we would be here today. That was God. And so maybe, though, today I'm a little afraid, like Herod was, that I'm afraid to let Jesus into certain parts of my life, certain behaviors of my life, certain friendships, certain relationships, certain possibilities for my future. And I'm afraid. And the first step in dealing with this fear is to acknowledge it and to bring it before God. Is that me today? Is that where I'm at today in my life? And then you have the Pharisees, you have the religious leaders. These people, they were asked and consulted. They said, well, he'll be born in Bethlehem. He will be a shepherd of my people Israel, the gospel says. The Old Testament referred to him in that prophecy. You know, the interesting thing about the Pharisees is they knew the right answer. They gave the right answer, but they did not go. They didn't show up. They just were content to know the rule book, if you will, of the faith, but they had their own interpretation. They had their own, but that's not, this isn't the moment of the Messiah. And at the end of the day, he wouldn't be born in Bethlehem, maybe at this time of history or in this kind of way. So they didn't go. And this is perhaps, this kind of self-conceit, this religious formalism, this religious comfort, maybe it can be you and me sometimes, right? Where we get comfortable in our faith. We do our church thing. We go to reconciliation maybe sometimes. We try not to kill anyone or break the Ten Commandments in a serious way. But that isn't what our faith is primarily about. Our faith is primarily about a deep, personal, passionate encounter with the living God who's inflamed and passionate for you and me. Is that my relationship with God? Or am I giving into a life of formalisms, a life of rituals simply, of just checking off the box of my faith? And if we are, it's no wonder that at times we feel threatened by Jesus and we get content to not do more for our faith, to live our faith in a more serious way. So let's ask ourselves, am I a little bit like the Pharisees who talk about God sometimes, who show up at church sometimes, but deep down I'm a person of the rule book maybe. I'm a person who doesn't really have a deep personal relationship with God, which is something that is very Catholic and something very Christian. A person who, like the Pharisees and religious leaders of Jesus' time, were hypocrites in the sense that they didn't live out their faith with love for their neighbor. They didn't put their neighbor first. They didn't fulfill the command of God to be merciful and patient and kind and forgiving to others a lot of times. Is that me today? Is that the kind of faith I have? A stagnant faith that thinks I'm holy, but at the end of the day, I don't imitate the love of God. I don't imitate the holiness of God in the way I treat my neighbor. I'm selective in the way I distribute God's love to different people. So, brothers and sisters, as we continue this, our journey sort of back into ordinary time, let's recognize that it's extraordinary time, because ordinary time is a continuation of what Jesus has done for us, which is extraordinary. The baptism of the Lord, which we celebrate today, that we're sons of God, daughters of God. We are sharing the divine life, the divine royal progeny of God, now by Christ. This is extraordinary. And this is something we can't forget. It's something every day we should wake up remembering. We should thank God throughout the day for it, and we should go to bed thanking God for it. And hopefully, by His grace, by our cooperation, we will become sons and daughters of God, not just in fact, because in fact we are by our baptism. It's a free gift. But that we will also become sons of God in truth, in terms of living out the identity of a son of God, that we become conformed to the heart of Jesus, that Christ begins to not take over our lives, but He unites our hearts to His, so that literally the heart of Jesus beats in us, that we be, if you will, a living saint. We become a living image of Jesus. That's what our Christian baptism, the power of our baptism, the power of being united to the vine of Christ, that's what it can do to us. That's what Mother Teresa was. That's what John Paul II was like. That is what all the saints were like. And they simply cooperated with the grace of God in their baptism. May we also accept that calling. And that way we will also someday hear the voice of the Father that we hear in the Feast of the Baptism to Jesus. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. May you recognize that God is well pleased to call you his son, his daughter. Let's accept that gift and let's go out and live it by his grace. God bless you this day and have a great week.